We're resuming the recording. Good morning, everyone. So I had a dream. That I was in Shul Shabbos morning.
This was coming. I knew it. I'm just saying, I knew that.
And then I woke up and I said, "Oh, it wasn't a dream. It's true. I believe."
Oh God.
That was really.
I'm going to a conservative shul next week.
I bet that never happened to you before.
Well, it did not.
Welcome.
You're right. It was very nice. Embarrassing, but nice.
Yes. Well, when we embarrass people, we try to be nice about it.
And embarrass people. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I want to do is something that I thought of over the weekend that reminded me of a shiur that I heard once years and years ago from Rav Goldvicht from YU, who we had him here for Shabbos, and he's just like he doesn't need my approbation, but I'm trying to find the right word to describe, or words to describe. I mean, aside from his godless in Torah, his tremendous Torah knowledge, but when you hear him, you just want to hear more and more from him. And he's so sweet, and he has such chen, his smile, and we're very connected. And his, I told you, I have been trying for a while to get him to come, and then we met at Mincha on El Al in 30,000 feet in the air. And he's like, "Maybe I should come to your community." I go, "Please, I've been trying. Let's do it." And we made it happen. And his son, sons are all one more accomplished than the next, but his son, Rav Itiel, who works for Eshet Torah, he does a tremendous outreach job in Israel, but he's also an assistant to my Rebbe, to Rabbi Wein, in Beit Knesset HaNasi. So we have a lot of connections there. But the reason I thought of this is because, obviously it was a very, very troubling few days for Klal Yisrael. And now even compounded by within our community, we had a very, very tragic loss in our community. A young father died, a well-known family here. Levi was yesterday, and so there's a lot of tsaros. And during this period of the Omer, there's a lot of tsaros. And this week, in the Torah reading, we read the Tochacha, we read the curses. So on Sunday, in between this activity and that activity, I spent with our family. Actually, we watched for 2 hours. We watched the Levaya for Donny Morris, Zichrono Livracha. So I wanted to dedicate our shiur. Our learning should be Le'ilin Nishmaso, Nachman Daniel ben Aryeh. I have connections to his family as well. His grandfather is a very well-known rabbi in the RCA, Rabbi Cronenberg. His two uncles, colleagues of mine, Rabbi Chil Morris, who's in Southfield, Michigan. The one who spoke at the funeral, is a rabbi in a synagogue in Beavis Marks, Beavis Marks, and the Spanish Portuguese in London. So he's relatively recent in the last couple of years, but it was just heartbreaking. And my daughter actually went. She went to the funeral in Shalvim, and they announced, and I'm sure it was much more than that, but they announced at one point during the funeral that there were 34,000 people online watching this Levaya for a 19-year-old boy. And he was like such a ziz. I mean, it was really, you hear about him. And also because I sit on the board in Shiur University High Schools. He was a star pupil, graduate, role model of a student. He certainly capitalized on every moment that he had in his young life for good, which is something that we can all learn from, and someone that we should all emulate. And unfortunately, a life taken too soon. And his parents have returned today, actually, to Bergenfield to sit shiva, and to conclude the shiva. And it's just it's very, very difficult, and we're left with lots of questions and lots of kind of just head scratching. But that leave that for the pundits. Our job is to say, what can we do to make ourselves better? That's always been our approach. I struggled a lot this Shabbos of trying to balance. We had this big simcha and trying to find the balance, and we can't ignore it, but at the same time we don't want to harp on it. And so I hope we did okay with that. So what I'm gonna start first with is a Gemara. We're gonna look at two Gemaras. There's a Gemara in Megillah. Actually, we do this. Where's this page first? No, this is the Gemara in Tainus. This Gemara. Do you see the Gemara in Megillah in front of you?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I'm gonna scroll down here, and I'm gonna zoom it up. It's this page right here. Okay, and the Gemara says as follows. Now, we know that certain Torah readings have to be done at a certain time. Okay, so the way the structure of our Torah reading schedule. So, for instance, um, Erev Tisha B'av is always going to be Devarim, Shabbos Chazon, and Eschanan. But Eschanan is always Nachman. Okay, you know when you go up to the Catskills for the singles week. There's always like the big, or we know, and we know that certain parashos have to be read at a certain time there. So in a sense, they're seasonal. And Chazal had a notion behind this. They understood why this was. So the Gemara says here, it's right where it's bracketed towards the bottom of the page. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Ezra Tikkun Lahem LiYisrael Shu Koren Kololo Shebetorah Kohanim Kodem Atzeres. Mishnah Torah Kodem Rosh Hashanah. So Ezra, we're talking about the time of Ezra, the Torah readings that we have, or the system of the Torah reading that we have, meaning that we should read, and to Gemara Bava Kama also, that we read on Monday, we read on Thursday, we read on Shabbos Mincha, and the whole thing there. We shouldn't go 3 days without Torah. So the reason why we have, he says, that you read Kol and Kalalos. Kalalos are curses. So in this week's parsha in Bechukotai, we have two parshas, Behar, Bechukotai, and that's one of the reasons why it's doubled, is so we can get to Bechukotai now. Bechukotai is read, it's the end of Vayikra, and has the curses, is read always before Shavuos. That's what it says. Kodem Atzeres, when the Gemara says Atzeres, it means Shavuos. And Sheba Mishnah Torah, and the curses that are in Devarim, which means Parshas Kisavo, is always Kodem Rosh Hashanah. Is always read before Rosh Hashanah. So that's principle that the Gemara states, that the Tochacha here should be read soon before Shavuos, and the Tochacha there should be read soon before Rosh Hashanah. Why? My timer. So Amar Abaye v'itemi Reish Lakish kadei shetichle Hashana b'kil laseha. It's not a bad principle that we say. We kind of want to like be done with the year, and I think this year especially, when 2020 was ending, right when it was like New Year's Eve 2020, we were all like, I had this plan that maybe we should have had like instead of a New Year's party, we should have like a giant bonfire in the parking lot, and we could take all our 2020 stuff and just burn it, because everybody was more than willing to be over with that year, right? It was just a miserable year, you know. It was 2020, it was blah blah blah, you know. So Kadosh Baruch Hu decided to give our family like one last zetz, you know, like, so my father died on Christmas Eve 2020. It's like, okay, you're going to end the year sitting Shiva. Okay. Let's just, take that one. So let's end the year in all its misery, or really it means all its curses and all the terrible things that happen. Let's just be done with it, be over with it. Done. Okay. So that's fair. So now you can ask the obvious question. I understand why before Rosh Hashanah to end the year, but what does that have to do with Shavuos? Right? So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara says, I understand before Rosh Hashanah that you want to end the year, because that's really the end of the year. Wait a minute. But before Shavuos, is Shavuos Rosh Hashanah? What do you want to end? What curses do you want to end before Rosh Hashanah? So the Gemara says, when it says, and you have to know how to read the Gemara. The Gemara or in Aramaic, it's really in. It doesn't mean ein, no. It means in, means yes in Aramaic. So the Gemara says, yes. Atzeres nami Rosh Hashanah hi disnan uva atzeres al peiros ha'ilan. Yes, we know that because the Mishnah says that on Atzeres, on Shavuos, we are judged for a number of things. So let's look what the Gemara is referring to. It's the next page. If you flip it over, if I can, am I able to? Let's. There we go. Okay. So the Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says, Arba'a prakim, in 4 chapters, ha'olam nidon. Ba'pesach al ha'tevua, ba'atzeres al peras ha'ilan. On Pesach, people are judged for grain. On Atzeres, you're judged for fruits of the tree. And Rosh Hashanah, Kaboya Olam Ober L'Fanech Givnei Maron. And on Rosh Hashanah, everyone is judged. Human beings are judged like the sheep, it says. And it goes on. And the last thing it says, Uvachag Nidonan Alamayim. And on Chag, which whenever Atzeres means Shavuos, and when it says Chag always means Sukkos. So there are 4 times a year when people are judged. And this is Mishnah found where? In Rosh Hashanah. So since it's found in Rosh Hashanah, that's why the judgment is there, and that's why it's called a new year. Okay, fine. Now, what's the question then you're going to ask? What's the obvious question now? So the Gemara said, I understand why before Rosh Hashanah, because it's the end of the year, but it's Shavuos Rosh Hashanah. Gemara says, yeah, it is. It's a Rosh Hashanah because you're judged on Paras Elon, and here's the proof. So what's the question? What about the other two? The Mishnah itself said that Pesach is also a time of judgment, and Sukkot is also a time of judgment. So why do we pick Shavuos? Why do we single out Shavuos? So here, this is like such like a beautiful Rav Goldvich type of Torah, where he'll take you on a journey through all of Chumash, Tanakh, and Shas, and most of it we're going to find here in our Chumash. And one last thing I'm going to share with you at the end, which I didn't print for the crowd here, but it's one of the kind. It's a kind of Gemara where if you close your eyes and listen to it, it's such a beautiful, beautiful message. So the first thing that we'll do, if you have the Chumash in front of you, if you have an art scroll Chumash, okay, let's turn to page 1042, I believe. What? What does it mean to be judged on that? So we'll see. So choose to bring? No, that basically it's like for a grain, it's decided how much money you're going to make that year. It's decided how blessed you'll be with fruit. So let's see, what does that mean, fruit? But that's going to be the crux of the question. Is not judging. That's not reward. It's like you're like it's set. It's almost like it's the judgment on your life, just like the judgment whether you're going to live or die, but the judgment on how much you're going to make, the judgment on how productive you're going to be, something like that. Which then you can get into all the questions about free will and all that, but that's above my pay grade. Okay, so here on page 1042, at the end of chapter 20, here we have what happens when you're in Parsha Shoftim. When it talks about conquering different cities, and the last this is, by the way, it was just Earth Day also, so maybe this could be a Tu B'Shvat shiur, this could be an Earth Day shiur. I'm very I'm very environmentally conscious, right? Okay, but ask anybody in my house, I'm shuggen about recycling. Like somebody throws a recyclable in the garbage, and I'm like doing a deep dive in there, like, come on, how hard is it, So it's just a question of laziness. So ki tatsur el ir yamim rabim lehilachem alei letafsag lo tashchit et eitzel lindoch alei garzen alav garzen ki mimenu tochel v'ato lo tichrot ki adam eitz hasad lavo miponech b'matzor rak eitz asher teda ki lo eitz machal hu oto tashchit v'karata. I'm trying to read as Sephardic as possible. It's very hard for me. Uvanita matzor ala ir asher hi osa imecha milchama ad ridata. 19 and 20. Look at this. When you besiege a city for many days to wage war against it to seize it, don't destroy the trees by swinging an axe against them. For from it you will eat, and you shall not cut it down. It is a tree of the field, a man that it should enter the siege before you. Only a tree that you know is not a food tree you may destroy and cut down, and build a bulwark against the city that makes war with you until it is conquered. Okay, so this is also known as the if you look in the commentary, the preservation of fruit trees. It's very nice, right? If you have fruit bearing trees, you can't just cut them down. I don't know about you, but if you have to cut a tree down for whatever, sometimes you have to cut trees down. We do. And sometimes they're sick. Sometimes they're just simply in the way. And sometimes, but it's like a sad thing. Again, I'm not such a tree hugger. I'm not. But to me, like something that took so long to get there and you have to cut it down, it's sad, right? It's a very sad thing. The Gemara said, and the Chumash says, okay, in the midst of a chapter dealing with warfare, which by definition is destructive, the Torah demands that Jews remain conscious of the need to maintain their regard for the general welfare and cleave to their love of goodness. If people try to remain good even at times that call forth for basest instincts, they will not try to waste even a mustard seed, and they'll be able to perfect their character steadily, according to the Sefer Chinuch. But from here we have a mitzvah, a well-known mitzvah, something called Bal Tashchis. Is that my father, Olav Shalom, would say, waste not, want not. Is that we don't waste. We shouldn't waste. Conspicuous consumption, however you want to phrase it, but we don't waste. So part of it is it originates from cutting down fruit-bearing trees. But the line that Rav Goldvich always focused on, he says, Ki ha'adam eitz hasadeh, is that a person, now, by the way, it's Adam, human. Doesn't say Yehudi, doesn't say, Ish or Isha, it's Adam, mankind. Mankind is compared to a tree. So if I would ask you, like, I don't know, in all of the Chumash or Tanakh, if I would say, mankind is compared to what? I don't know, anybody would say tree. I don't know, what would you say? Anyone? Bueller? No? I don't know. I mean, it's a tough one. We're like, mankind, maybe it's not compared to anything. Maybe an angel. Sometimes we're like an angel. Most of the times we're not. So the Torah compares Adam eitz hasadeh. Mankind is compared to a tree. And we'll see actually their numbers. Now if we use the tree metaphor, okay, so if I were to ask, imagine if we were like, if I was a professor and I had a blackboard, or now it's a whiteboard. You can't probably not even allowed to say blackboard anymore, but a whiteboard with dry erase markers, and I would, let's say, do some free association, humans and trees, okay? So if I were to say I'm in the class, I'm going to use the Socratic method. I'm going to pick on Vivian and say, Vivian, what comparison would you make between people and trees?
They both grow. They both need water.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Parts of us are rooted in earth, and parts of us go toward Hashem, grow upward toward Hashem spiritually.
I like this. You're like
Nice.
you're like a Breslover. I always knew you fit your little Hasidish, but like a nice kind of esoteric and existential thought of like, part of us are here, part of us are there. Remember, like we discussed last time with the Kruvim, the cherubs, that the wings are facing upward, but they're facing one another. It's man and man versus man and God. Okay, very good. I like this. Anything else? Any other thoughts? When we make a bracha on the Torah, you say it every day. We say Berachas Torah, or when someone has an aliyah, so we say the second bracha, Asher nasa lana Torah sames, v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. We make a reference to planting right there, which means, what does that mean? V'chayei olam nata b'tochenu, that the eternal reward, the chayei olam, which means the ultimate life, which is, this is not the ultimate, this is not the real life, by the way. I don't know, Susie, you don't have to type, you can talk, it's okay. Susie wrote, trees are renewal and tshuva. I like that also. They're seasonal, so it's a nice time of year, although it's a miserable time of year. And this year, perhaps more than other years. And we say that every single year. The allergies are just absolutely bonkers, off the charts, crazy. I had to take 2 kids to the doctor yesterday because they couldn't breathe, and it's tough. It's a tough season. So that, they go to sleep and then they come back and they blossom and they bloom and then they go through the whole cycle again. And that's kind of like a tshuva renewal thing, right? So we say the Chaye Olam, this is not the real world. The real world is the next world, which, I think it should help us sort of deal with death, although nobody likes to deal with death. The Chazal, I remember, always gave us the imagery that when a baby is in utero, right? So it's like the most idyllic existence. You don't gotta do anything. Everything's nice and warm. You could swim a little bit, and they come out, and the babies come out, and they're crying. I don't want to leave. So, but after a while, they realize, like, this is great. This is really good. And the same thing when we leave this world, we're crying also, because we want to let go. Eventually we'll come to realize. So just like going from one stage to the next, and I hope that does offer comfort for some people, not everyone, because you have to have a certain level of faith and emunah and belief. And given the fact that we live in a scientific world and we want to prove everything and know everything, and we can't prove and know everything, and it's very, very challenging. So you have to hold on to your belief. And if people say, "Oh, that's a crutch," I say, "Good. When you can't walk, you need a crutch." Good. Yes, Elian. I see now. Again, Elian is always like way she speaks way above my pay grade, the other Gan Eden. But yes, I mean, that's an ideal that we always want to get back to is Gan Eden. We want to return. We want to go back to where we were, to where we started, right? So another perhaps similarities Rav Goldwich mentions is that like when you plant a seed for planting a tree, I don't know if any of you are, sort of like gardening friendly, or some people are just gardening challenged. I'm not good with plants at all. I'm not good with flower. First, I'm allergic. I'm terribly allergic. I can't go. But my mother, God bless her, she'll live me well. She's loves the garden. Like, it's very therapeutic for a lot of people. It's nice. And then you see your work. But the seed, in order for the seed to take root and to grow, it kind of like has to disintegrate ultimately. But a tree, once a tree bears fruit, we say the tree is kayam. A tree's still there. And then it could bear more fruit in the next season, like Susie said, right? So we have these things. So, and the way we break it down is that there are three basic components, and then we look at it again from this sort of metaphysical comparison to Judaism. Is the tree has its roots, the tree has its trunk, and the tree has its fruit or its leaves or its branches. Okay, so the roots from which the tree draws its nourishment and its viability, its vitality. The trunk, which is the solid part, which holds up everything else. I mean, if you see, I mean, just by the way, just if you have a minute, like maybe when you're driving home, well, not while you're driving, but if you're walking, look at some of the trees in this neighborhood, and they're just absolutely phenomenal. We have a Japanese, what's that red? The Japanese, the red one, what's it called? Japanese maple, yes, thank you. It's our favorite tree, and we're blessed to have one in the backyard. I'm told that people, when they like move, they like take it with them because it's like such a really, it's a beautiful, gorgeous tree, and the way it spreads out, the kids climbing it. And then, like if we're on the top of our house, which is on top of a hill, it's like pretty high, and a tree at the base of the street on Route 10, there's a tree that's higher than the house, which you can only appreciate if you're standing on the top floor looking, and you think like, wow, that's amazing. That's really amazing. Like, that's a lot to hold up. Okay. So that's the base, the trunk of the tree holds it up. And then of course you have the fruit. So we say that, al shlosha dvarim ha'olam lamed. Torah, avoda, gemilas chasadim. The roots, how do we connect to God? What's the easiest way, or the best way? We hope it's the easiest way, but what's one of the ways that we connect to God on a regular basis? And that happens through tefillah. That's the roots. The roots of our existence is through prayer. What holds us up? What allows us to sustain all the burdens that we must carry in this world? What keeps us going? It's the Torah. It's our tradition, right? Just think of, and again, I have been having a real trouble focusing on a lot of things in the last few days, just trying to wrap my head around the enormity of a tragedy that happened in Eretz Yisrael. And you see, it's one thing when you see a number, it's another thing when you see the faces all at once on a page, 45 faces. But when you see video of the Shiva calls in Israel, that Rabbi Lau's office, the chief rabbi, and only in Israel it's like this. I could show you a picture. They published a list of the addresses and the phone numbers and the locations where people in Shiva. And people go. In Israel, it's very different than here. Here, it's like when we make a Shiva call, it's like we got to check off a box. Like, we sign the book. We have to sign a book. Like, also, why? Why do you have to sign a book when you go to a funeral?
I don't.
I'm with you, Vivian. I don't either. It's like so you could get credit, so they know you were there. And the Shiva also, it's like what day you go and how long you stay. People are keeping score. In Israel, it's totally different. People come in that don't know you, and then they're like, "What are you doing here?" They're like, "Oh, I heard that somebody was sitting Shiva." Or I once drove you in a taxi to the Makolet, so I thought I should pay my respect. That's how it is in Israel, because it's like one big mishpacha. So they publish when you see, and then there are two families in Yerushalayim that lost two sons each. And they show the like the Hatzalah workers who are going through a very, very difficult time now. The trauma that they're dealing with is just unreal. And how they go to try and comfort. And what happens is that the bereaved families are comforting the first responders because they had to live. And they know what they saw. They saw people with their lives. The story they said they're putting a young boy into the body bag and his phone is ringing and it says Ima. So can you imagine like seeing that and like how so what gets us through that? Torah tradition. Can you imagine if you had to do that, you didn't have a community? If you didn't have like a structure of how to deal with these things, if we didn't say like you have to bury right away and you have to sit and you have to face your grief. If we didn't have that, what would we do? That's Torah. That's what keeps us going. That's what supports us. And then, of course, what's the fruit of our trees? The fruit of our trees are all the good deeds that we do, the Masim Tovim, the wonderful acts that we have. And part of it, if you look in the beginning of the Chumash, now we're going to go back to the beginning. Let's go to page 10. We haven't been on page 10 in a while. Pasuk Zion, second chapter of the Chumash, Pasuk Zion, 2:7, and the pasuk says, this is the second notion of creation. Vayitzer Hashem Elokim es ha'adam afar min ha'adama vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim vayi adam lenefesh chaya. Hashem, God, formed the man of dust from the ground, and he blew into his nostrils the soul of life, and man became a living being. Rashi tells us here, it's in the second column of Rashi, in the left column, and it's 5 lines down. Okay, now there are a number of the Mefarshim are bothered by this. Why does the Torah, when it says Vayitzer, there's 2 yuds there, Vav Yud Sadi Resh. The word Vayitzer, when you write it in Hebrew, normally is only 1 yud. Why 2 yuds? Shtei Yitziris. There's 2 creations or 2 formations. The first thing Rashi tells us from the Medrash is Yitzira la'olam hazeh v'yitzira l'tchias hamesim. Is that when a person is created, there's actually 2 forms or 2 types of creation. You have your physical creation, and then you have this, I don't know what you would call it, your spiritual creation, your maybe you'd say it's the guf of the neshama. Often when we try to explain to people, or certainly younger children, when they see a burial for the first time, we say it's just like a grandparent. That's just the body there. That's not grandpa. That's not grandma. That's not your love. That's just the body. The neshama. Now try to define what a neshama is. What's a neshama? The neshama is your vitality, right? So going back, so if we use this metaphor of the tree, says Rabbi Goldwicht, then on Shavuos, when we're judged for Peira Se'ilah, if Shavuos is a time of judging the fruits of your tree. So in other words, how much will the sustenance and the trunk produce? If the sustenance is our tefillah, how much will our prayer, how much will our Torah, how much will our Torah study produce? In other words, how much will that translate into real life? And this life, and then there's, of course, the next life. How meaningful is the Torah and again, I'm not just talking about sitting and learning Torah all day, I'm saying, but because we'll see in a minute, how much will what you've absorbed and taken from your godly existence and studied and learned and honed and pruned, etc., how much will that produce in the sense of what kind of Jew are you going to be, and are you going to do acts of kindness, and are you going to daven better, and are you going to be a mensch, and all these things. And that's what we say. So now taking that to our parsha, I know it was a very long introduction to get to our parsha, but in our parsha, the very first Rashi in the second parsha, which is found on page 708. The first pasuk says, "Im bechukotai telechu, ves mitzvosai tishmeru, va'asisem asam." If you will follow my decrees and observe my commandments and perform them, then what happens? I will provide your rains in the time, the land will give its produce, and guess what? Ve'etz hasadeh yitain perio. the tree of the field will give its fruit. Now, what is that? Now, the simple explanation is, we can't ignore the Pashup shot, is you have to follow Torah, follow mitzvahs. If you do good, you get good. And which is followed by the Tochacha. If you don't do good, you get a lot of not good. Okay? Pretty simple system. Follow the rules, get rewarded. Don't follow the rules, get punished, which is an unbelievable oversimplification of Jewish life, but isn't that the way we follow? Isn't that the way we function? When something bad happens to us, we immediately attribute to, well, because I did this or I said that, and whatever God, what does God punish me for? What did I do wrong to deserve this? Okay. I don't know if we say that when good things happen, if we say, why is God rewarding me like this? Sometimes we do, maybe when we're overly rewarded, but on a regular basis, we should, which is why the first thing we do when we wake up in the morning is, right? Because why did God reward me that I should wake up today? Okay, so look at Rashi, the first Rashi in the parsha. In Bechukotai telechu, you'll follow in my chukim. We'll see what chukim is. Okay. Rashi says, Yachol zeh kiyum ha-mitzvos. You might think this refers to fulfilling of the mitzvos. Kishu omer ves mitzvosai tishmeru, harei kiyum ha-mitzvos amor. Wait, it's not fulfilling the mitzvahs because that's the next line. It says, if you will follow in my statutes or decrees and observe my mitzvahs. So what's the first thing referring to? Can't be referring to mitzvahs because that's the next phrase. So, harei kiyum ha-mitzvos amor, it's already mentioned. Hamani mekayim bechukosai telechu. What does it mean that if you follow in my statutes or in my decrees, shetihiyu amelim batorah, that you should be engrossed in the study of Torah. Now, what does that mean? How does that really answer the question? Okay, what does it mean to be omel batorah? Now, here we'll go back to a definition. If I ask you to define the word chok, what does the word chok mean?
Law.
A law, okay. I mean, in modern Hebrew, it's a chok. We have a chok hashvut, or we have a, a chok, or we have. But what? So, what's the shoresh of the word chok? It's hard to ask shoresh questions when there's only two letters in the thing. It's like, oh my God, I'm back in 10th grade Regents Hebrew. Okay, beged kefes gets a dagesh. Thank you.
Oh God.
Thank you, Rabbi.
That's what I just said.
Oh God.
So the word chok is related to the word. So, and again, the different interpretations of this, but it's related to the word chakika. Verstehst du, was meint chakika?
No.
Means to be engraved, like to be chiseled in. Is when you take it to a stone or into a harder object and you make impressions in it. That's called lachkok. So we're saying that if Bechukotai, if you will walk in other words, if everything you do, it's etched on every one of your actions or on your soul or on your existence, the Torah, then what's going to happen? Eitz hasadeh yitain pirio. The fruits, in other words, the sustenance and the trunk, everything that happens, right? What's going to happen? Then you'll see the benefit of it. In other words, if you live a life that is rooted in Torah, literally rooted in Torah, and if you think about it, Jewish law, there is no area of your life that Jewish law, some people will say, invades. Some people say, I remember I was very young, very, very young. It was last week. And I was teaching a class. I was in yeshiva, and I was probably, 19 years old. And when I would come home for Shabbos, I would learn with some of the guys in shul, and we were learning a Gemara, and they would ask me very sophisticated questions. And in retrospect, I realized I had no idea what I was talking about, and I had no idea how to answer them. But I remember one of these married guys, and they would say, like, "Why does God have to go in the bedroom?" I'm like, "I'm single. I don't know what you're talking about." I didn't know, but I acted like I don't know because I don't, But I remember people it stuck with me, thinking like, yeah, because there's no area of your life that halacha does not enter. Why? Because everything that we do has to be a reflection of our godly existence. And if we do that, in other words, in Bechukotai telechu, it's like to sit in a Gemara all day, although some may interpret it that way. But what it means is, if every action that I do in this world, every notion of my existence is rooted in the fact that I am a Torah, I'm a God person, then Eitz hasadeh yitain pirio. It will be reflected in the fruits of your tree. And that's why every major event in Jewish history, certainly in the Torah, they're like trees around. The first thing in the Torah, what happens, the whole episode revolves around a tree. Eitz hachayim, Eitz nas. What happens right after the splitting of the sea? They come to a place, there's no water. So what does God tell Moshe to do? The water's bitter. He says, take a stick and throw it in. Sham samlo chok mishpat v'sham. So we learn at the end of Beshalach, many instances of trees in the Chumash. There's a beautiful Gemara. Beautiful Gemara in Gittin, and a lot of people I've seen actually have done this custom, that they said that when a boy and a girl are born, that they would plant a certain type of tree when they're born. And when they get married, they find the tree that was planted for that boy and for that girl, and they use the branches to construct the chuppah. A really beautiful, beautiful imagery. And people actually have done this. Now, I don't know about you, like I happen to be a big fan of JNF. I'm a big supporter of JNF. Has anyone ever done the planting of trees in Israel? Right? Anyone?
Since grade school.
I read about it, and I've gotten certificates and this and that. And if you've seen the Shelley, when she'll watch it, she'll tell you she laughed in that scene in Salach Shabbati, when like they just keep changing the names on the trees, saying like, oh yeah, you donated these trees. They just keep changing, right? And I remember when I did it, but it was not so long. It was only the first time I ever did it was maybe about 5 years ago, and I thought it'd be like such a hokey, corny thing. And my wife and I were there, cried like a baby. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm in touch with my feelings. The notion of planting something in Eretz Yisrael, getting on your hands and knees and having your hands in the dirt and feeling the soil of Israel and planting a tree that's going to grow, it was so unbelievably meaningful. If you look at our lives like that, what are we planting? What are we doing? What are we instilling? So imagine that. So like when you have a child and then you see how the branches become and you make the chuppah out of it, and then guess what? They're going to start their own, that's their bias, and they're going to start their own house and do it. It's really something. So when we say on Friday nights in the Mizmor LeDavid, we say, Shisulim bebeis Hashem bechatzros Elokeinu yafrichu. If we are planted in my kids go to Morashah, so the bunks are all named after trees. There's like shtilim, nitzim, I don't know, nitzanim. They always use shtilis, nitzis, whatever, but that's all named after trees. As they grow older, the trees become bigger. Okay, so the shisulim, if you're planted beveis Hashem, then mechatzros Elokeinu yafrichu, you're going to flourish in the chatzar of God. Meaning, if you're well grounded. Beveis Hashem. If your planting, if your origins, if your foundation is planted well in the house of Hashem, then guess what? You're going to flourish in the land of God, meaning in the rest of the world. Doesn't mean you have to stay in yeshiva your whole life, but if you have a good foundation, then when you go out in life, it's going to reflect, and you're constantly working on this. Okay, so what we're saying is on Shavuos. On Shavuos, we're being judged peiros ha'ila. In other words, what we're saying is whatever failures I may have had last year spiritually, Torah-wise, I want that tichle hashana v'kilaseha. I want that to be over with. And Shavuos, I'm going to start anew because I'm going to be judged on peiros ha'ila. I have the ability to start fresh. And not Rosh Hashanah, it's Shavuos. I have the ability to start fresh and say, I'm going to begin my new Torah year. I'm going to study more. I'm going to daven better. I'm going to do this mitzvah better. And again, you can't do it all at once. It has to be in a gradual fashion, but you have to acknowledge it and say, look, let's be honest. There are certain mitzvahs that we're really good at and certain mitzvahs that we stink at. That's human nature. We can't be great at everything. And there's certain things that are challenging for us, certain things I get, certain things I don't get. I get it. And it's different for every single person. So we try to work on it. And that's why the focus is we study Pirkei Avos during this time of year to better our behavior towards others, our attitudes towards God. But that's why Dafka, the Gemara says that we have to end this year now. This is a new year because as far as Torah goes, Peiroseh doesn't mean literally your fruits, but it means the peiros of the productivity or the result of all of your spiritual labor that you have done over the year. How will that be reflected in the next year? And that's why we want to get all the bad out of the way. I'll finish. I have this one of my favorite Gemaras They made us, anything is good, by the way, when they make a song out of it. So let me just see here. I'm going to just. Okay, do you see that page come up? Tanis 5b? Okay, I'm going to read it out loud because not everybody here has the copy here. The Gemara in Tanis on 5b, and this is the famous Elon Elon song. You must know this, right? Elon Elon, Bama Avarechecha. I could sing it for you, but then everybody will go to sleep. So the Gemara says, Ki have mifter mahadari amalei levarachan mar. Amalei am shalach. The Gemara loves to tell stories about how the rabbis spoke to one another. It gives us an example, gives us a model of how we should speak to one another, how you greet someone, how you begin a class, how you ask a question. And here the Gemara is giving a lesson about how do you take leave of someone, okay? Sometimes, I had a friend that he had a sign made in his house that we love having company. Some company makes us happy when they come, and some company makes us happy when they leave, okay? So when they were taking leave of one another, Rav Nachman says to Rav Yitzchak, he says, Rebbe, give me a blessing. So Rav Yitzchak says to him, I'm going to tell you a parable. What was this marital comparable? Okay. What's the mashal? What's the comparison? Somebody who's walking through a desert. He was hungry, he was tired, he was thirsty, and he found a tree whose fruits were sweet, whose shade was pleasant, and a stream of water flowed beneath it. He ate from the fruits of the tree, he drank from the water of the stream, he sat in the shade of the tree. Ah, oh, this is a machaya. What a beautiful afternoon. Amar Ilan Ilan Bama Verechacha. And when he wanted to leave, he had to continue on his journey. He wanted to be thankful. He wanted to be appreciative of this tree. And he said, how should I bless you? Tree, Ilan, Ilan. How shall I bless you? By the way, it's just like an unbelievable softball when you have a bar mitzvah kid named Ilan, or if you have a bat mitzvah girl named Ilana. I mean, I have done this. It's because it's the most, if you don't know any Gemara and you know only this Gemara, I promise you, you have somebody calls on you, got to give a Devar Torah. This is it. Tanis 5b, 6a. I'm telling you, this is it. You will not go wrong. You'll be a rock star. You ever quote this Gemara. I promise you. Money back guarantee. So he says, how shall I bless you? If I say that the blessing to you is your fruit should be sweet, but it's proven, they're already sweet. If I say your shade should be pleasant, it's already pleasant. If I say that a stream of water should flow beneath you, it already flows. So rather, how shall I bless you? So look at the line here. Rather, the blessing should be, you give to the tree, may it be God's will that all saplings which they plant from you should be just like you. So it is with you, he says to his host. Im betorah hare Torah, im ba'usha hare usha, im bevanim hare vanim. Elihi ratzon shehet setza'e me'acha kemosecha. So he says to his teacher, when I take leave, what should I give you? Bracha, you should know Torah, you know Torah. You should have a beautiful family, you have it already. Rather, my bracha to you shall be that God's will should be that your offspring shall be just like you. Right? Isn't that like what we're working for our whole lives? Our whole lives is that we want to, and it starts with ourselves. We want to create a model which others can emulate, not just for the reason that others can emulate it, but we want our next generation to be proud to say that they came from us. Okay. And I thought about it this week because, when I'm listening to these Hispadim, it was just unbelievable. Like, this is like he was a very special young man. Ask anyone who knew him, and the boy took his learning, his year in Shalvim very seriously, and he was already going. He was shopping last week for Sfarim because he was thanks on a bet, and he was a mensch, and he was respectful of his parents and his grandparents and his friends and the way they spoke about it. And it's not it's not exaggeration, it's not fluff. This kid was the real deal. They actually found his schedule down to the minute of how he was going to learn. And it's just a shame that, it ends there. We say that we can't give him the bracha that, and all your offspring should be just like you. But we could bless one another. We should learn from this young man. And he lived a full life in his 19 years, just turned 19 at Erev Pesach, that, we should be more like him. We should try to maximize our time and maximize our midos and try to be the best people that we can be, and that people would look at us and say, I hope that more people will be like you. So I hope that in the Sham of Nachman, Daniel, Ben Aryeh should have an aliyah, and all the other 44 holy souls who, they went to achieve a greater spiritual height, and their lives were taken. And Lag BaOmer, which is a day which is recognized as a yontif, and anniversaries for many who get married, because they first get married, and the Omer, unfortunately for these, 43 families, it's going to be a yahrzeit. But Shavuos is coming. We just keep saying, and we can't say it enough. Tichla shana v'kilaseha. God, please, let's have all these curses be done with us. Let's move on to good things. Hopefully we have simchas to celebrate, good occasions to celebrate with one another, and we can learn from it at the same time. We should be zocha to improve ourselves. So I hope everyone has, it's nothing like having me depress you, on a Tuesday morning. And Cheva said she's going to come back to Shul Shabbos and give the sermon. Yeah, Merit would like to see that. We should all merit to see that. How's that? Okay. Everybody have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next week. I will.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.